former Central Intelligence Agency analyst, 10-year veteran of the U.S. Marine Corps. He was a counterinsurgency expert in Southeast Asia for his 4-year tour there. He also served as an analyst for the National Intelligence Council. McMichael graduated M.A. with a Ph.D. in history from the University of Oregon. And it just goes on and on with all of his whistleblowing. He resigned from the CIA in July of '83 because he felt the agency was misrepresenting intelligence for political reasons. But we see a lot of that today, don't we? Where these contractors that have a stake in exaggerating things to get funds are caught lying constantly, or the lies about WMDs in Iraq. His public resignation from the agency gave credence and notability to the vocal indictment of the Reagan administration's policy towards Central America. He was considered the key witness in the Nicaragua versus the United States. The case was heard in '86 for the International Court of Justice. And it just goes on from there. He's a member of Veterans of Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, founded by Ray McGovern, and the Association of National Security Alumni, and the Association of Responsible Dissent, an outspoken critic of the Iraq War and the Bush administration. He has participated in 6 documentary films. And journalist John Pilger has described him as a CIA renegade. And Ray McGovern said that he's one of the most important experts we can talk to about fake intelligence leading us not just into Iraq, but now Iran. And we have him on because in the last 2 days, Bolton, the former ambassador to the UN, and Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, who put out key disinfo about WMDs in 2002, they're back all over national television promoting that Iran must be bombed or needs to be attacked, as Bolton's saying, by next week, middle of next week. Here's the headline: Israel has 8 days to hit Iran site, Bolton says, before they fuel the reactor, because then if they hit it, it'll cause a Chernobyl-type meltdown and rain down radiation in the region. It'll obviously be seen as a serious crime against humanity. So joining us is David MacMichael. David, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. That rather lengthy CV you gave me only proves I've never been able to hold a regular job.
Ray McGovern, we were getting him on. He's a regular contributor to the show, but he was going to be traveling today, so he couldn't come on. He recommended you and said that you're even more senior in your knowledge, so that's quite a compliment coming from Ray, who we've seen stunning accuracy in his trends forecasting. Let's get into, I mean, you want to start at the beginning with Iraq or even before with disinformation you exposed in the 80s, or where we're going with Iran?
Yeah, well, look, you can just take as a general statement that disinformation is a principal activity in a wartime situation. And now that we're involved in a war on terror, as we were previously involved in the Cold War, part and parcel of the government direction of that is disinformation. And this is designed, on the one hand, to ensure public support for the policy decided upon by those in control of conduct of foreign policy. And the second aspect, of course, is to delude and punish the designated enemy. So disinformation is, let me put it this way, in going back to the CIA background and the conduct of covert operations, a rule of thumb is 75% of covert operations is disinformation. So that tells you what trust you can have in the statements that are produced by government officials.
And I've now seen public statements by the Pentagon in the last few years that now 90% of what they do is psychological warfare. So they're converting even more into brainwashing, propaganda, disinfo, or info war, as they call it.
Yes, that's very much part of it, and there are many aspects to that. Going back to the Manchurian Candidate days, but yeah, that is a huge part of what this vastly expanded Pentagon, plus, of course, this huge apparatus that was exposed in those remarkable articles of now 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago in the Washington Post on this huge expansion of this national security apparat.
Top secret USA, 800.
That's precisely it. That's must reading for your listeners.
854,000 highest level private spies. I mean, isn't this really the end of America? A private corporate contractor offshore takeover of frontline combat troops, intelligence, supply, logistics. I mean, everything. And you look at these companies; these are international. It isn't the communist Chinese or the Arabs or the Russians overthrowing the United States. It's the private intelligence takeover and the $2 trillion a year of the Defense Department and the contractors are gobbling up.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, you don't have to speak of the end of America. You might reasonably speak the end of America, the America that perhaps you and I grew up in. But it certainly speaks to the points made so accurately by Howard Zinn, the recently deceased Howard Zinn, I hate to say, in his numerous books on, the people's history and so forth. Is, look, what you're dealing with, and I'm glad you raised the point, Alec, on the use, the privatization here, the use of corporations in this. The law requires, I tell you right now, the law, as it put forward in the courts of the United States and elsewhere as well, controlling corporate behavior, is that the fiduciary responsibility of the corporate leadership is to its shareholders, and it is obliged, again, by law, to take all actions which will benefit its shareholders. And if this means in seeking contracts in the national security area to manufacture or enhance the alleged threat, which would justify their getting a contract, that's what they're going to do. And the more influential these people become, and God knows they've been influential for a very long time, this is the way it's going to go. I don't consider that the end of America. I'm just considering it the worsening of America.
Well, I mean, look, the CIA is barred under federal law from domestic operations, but it's come out they're even running local fusion centers, so they don't care. And now they've got private contractors and the CIA and the Army picking targets and running drone attacks. And so that really is a covert takeover of the government when you have these private interests in many areas now dwarfing people that are in government service. And I had Hamid Gul, the former head of Pakistani intelligence, on yesterday, and he was saying that, look, he said, I'm not involved in the Taliban or Al-Qaeda. This is ridiculous. They're attacking people in Pakistan to stir up the tribal areas, to destabilize our country, so they have a pretext to widen the war here. And he said these private contractors have an incentive to lie about this, to expand the war. And he was saying they were there 2 years ago. The Pentagon lied. Now they admit they are there. But I don't know if he's telling the complete truth. But I look,
Alex, I think the key phrase you used in quoting Hamid Gul there was about these corporations that are involved. Is they have an incentive, he said, to expand the alleged threat, to create conditions in which their contracts will be extended, expanded, and inadequately supervised. And that's absolutely correct. And that, as I said, is the by corporate law as practiced in courts. That is the obligation of the corporate leadership, is to do everything legally possible to enhance the profits to the shareholders.
But the CIA isn't allowed without warrants on paper to spy on the American people. How do they then come out and admit that there's almost 1 million private contractors with the highest security clearance spying on the American people? I mean, Poindexter 6 or 7 years ago got in trouble for Total Information Awareness Network, and then the Washington Post reported, well, they just made it private, so that's okay. I mean, to me, that makes it even more illegal.
Yeah, well, I I would say the question of legality, of course, will be handled in the courts. And one of the unfortunate, and I can tell you this from a lot of direct experience with this in cases. I used to put out a publication called Unclassified for some years. It ceased publication about 8 or 9 years ago now, a little longer than that. But I had a section in there, which I published every 2 months, on shadow justice, describing the way the United States courts, at the local and especially at the federal level, handled cases in which the government came forward and argued classified material, national security, and the general 99%, with the exception, by the way, of Judge Walsh, who handled the Iran-Contra cases, who was, in my view, one of the great heroes of the American legal system.
So the default is
but the point I'm going to make here is that when you're talking about the courts and is it illegal, is 90% of the cases the federal courts will wash their hands of any case in which the government comes forward and says national security, classified material, and I've heard this phrase used over and over again. Well, as the judges, we can't understand the intricacies of the intelligence system, which is like a great mosaic, you see, and if you only move one tile in it, it could disrupt the whole thing. So, case dismissed.
Well, that's the issue since 1947 with the National Security Act. Tens of trillions of dollars spent, total secrecy. Mm-hmm. Even if it began good, which the evidence shows it clearly didn't, I mean, it's an absolute 100% prescription for tyranny.
Well, it certainly leads that way, and I think one of the things that I have focused on over the years is this use of the term national security, which has no real definition. And one of the, marks that you can give, the plus mark you can give to Dwight Eisenhower, who, of course, warned about the military-industrial complex and leaving, but who deliberately refused to use the term national security. He said, national defense I can understand. He says, national security, what is that? And there is no legal definition for it, but it's been used to, justify or at least rationalize a whole range of government activities over the years, which, I think you accurately describe as tyrannical, certainly unconstitutional.
Well, David, we know why Eisenhower really got upset. He even wrote about it some. L.L. Lemster came to him and said, we want to bomb D.C. and Miami, attack Marine Corps bases, and blame it on the Cubans and the Russians, and he said no. They brought it to Kennedy, and he fired him. So we know why he was getting concerned.
Oh, yeah. No, there are, believe me, there are not, when you say that, the reaction of most people is to say, well, what kind of nutcases are those who can, walk into the Oval Office and give that sort of advice to a president of the United States, that there must be something wrong with the system that allows these people to go around, not wearing a straitjacket. But there are these people, and part of it, of course, is the reaction. There's a famous instance early on in the history of the CIA when concern was being expressed about activities, which, going back to Iran, was the great success in overthrowing the elected government of Iran back in the 1950s.
Operation-Ajax.
Yes, of course. And when Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, and a very crafty guy, by the way, proposed that to the Senate that he would like to bring in groups of senators and explain to them exactly what this new CIA was doing, is the then senior senator from Massachusetts told him, no, there are things we'd rather not know about.
So there's also this implied consent where the government really does know what's going on. They just like to basically have that plausible deniability. Stay there.